Okay, so philosophy, as you know, explores the mysteries of existence. One philosopher, the infamous Alexius Meinong, maintained that philosophy was too limited in the scope of its investigations, that philosophers should also concern themselves with non-existence. Meinong posed a puzzle which has proved very hard to resolve. We think all the time, and we talk all the time about the non-existent. When we consider non-actual possibilities, when we engage imaginatively with fiction, we think about things like Tintin, we think about things like Hermione Granger. We think about these things, but if these things can be the objects of our thought, if these things are available for us to think about, then there are such things, right? They must exist in some sense, but they don't. So that's the puzzle. It's a puzzle about thought and language. Specifically, it's a puzzle about what philosophers of mind call intentionality and what philosophers of language call reference. Intentionality is the aboutness of thought. So thoughts can be about things. If you think about it, this is a remarkable feature of thoughts. Tables, chairs can't be about things, but thought can connect, it can link to things in the world. This is something that philosophers of mind want to understand, therefore. The reference of a thing, a reference of a piece of language, a word or a phrase, is the thing that it stands for. So consider the name Theresa May. The reference of that name is the person Theresa May, the Prime Minister. So again, you have something, in this case, a piece of language, a mere word, that connects or relates to something in the world. Obviously, this feature of language, its ability to reach out and connect with something in the world, is important to the communicative function of language. And so philosophers of language are particularly concerned to understand the nature of reference. But we want to understand intentionality, we want to understand reference. Our explanation of these phenomena has to cover cases of thought about, cases of reference to things that don't exist, as well as things that do exist. So this isn't merely an intellectual puzzle, this is a pressing problem for philosophy of mind and language. I've suggested that intentionality and reference are relational in nature. We have relations between thinkers' words on one hand and objects on the other. So think about a case of thought about something that doesn't exist, a thought about Pegasus, the winged horse of Greek mythology. If what I've said is correct, you have the thinker, and then you have thought relating that thinker to the object of thought, Pegasus. But for you to have the thought, then there must be the thinker, and there must also be such a thing as Pegasus. Now, some of you may be thinking at this point, but hang on here, there's no problem here, is there? Pegasus, sure there's such a thing as Pegasus, but Pegasus is just an idea. Has anyone been thinking that? Stop thinking that, that's a bad thought. So here's the thought, here's the bad thought. Think about a case, again, a case of thinking about something from ancient Greece. In this case, a real thing from ancient Greece, the Parthenon. I have a Parthenon idea, and I think about the Parthenon via that idea. Another way of putting this, the idea in my head, the Parthenon idea, is a representation. It's a representation of the thing I'm thinking about, the Parthenon. It isn't that the idea is the Parthenon. They're two different things. So if Pegasus thinking has the same structure as Parthenon thinking, again, we have my representation of Pegasus, a representation as of a winged horse. And then we have the thing I'm thinking about, Pegasus, the thing that this representation represents. Again, two things, not one. But maybe in this case, there is something different. Maybe there's a crucial difference. Maybe what we have in the Pegasus case is just an idea. So the suggestion isn't that Pegasus is an idea. The suggestion is that I have a representation in my head as of a winged horse, but in this case, there is nothing corresponding to that representation. There's just the idea. So this is a good thought. Is this the solution to the puzzle? Well, arguably not. There are lots of ideas, right? We have lots of ideas, lots of different ideas. Think about another case then. We both have ideas about Clark Kent / Superman. Imagine that we've both watched the movie, except we've watched it rather inattentively. We're both confused. We don't realize that Clark and Superman are the same fictional character. Yeah? This is terrible movie watching habits. But I have an idea. My idea of Clark / Superman is the idea of a Man of Steel. You have an idea. Your idea of Clark / Superman is as of a mild-mannered reporter. There are these two ideas, and yet we want to say, don't we, that these two ideas are ideas of the same fictional character. Okay? But if we want to say that, then we have to say that there is a thing, Clark / Superman, that both these different ideas concern. So we need there to be such a thing as Clark / Superman. What I really like about this puzzle, there are two views you can take, and it's not just that the people who take each view consider the other view wrong. The people who take each view consider the other view to be absurd, to be ludicrous. Realists, people who think that there are such things as Superman, such things as Hermione, such things as Sherlock Holmes, maintain that obviously there are such things. If I'm thinking about Sherlock Holmes, what else am I thinking about? Obviously there's such a thing as Sherlock Holmes. People on the other side of the question will say, obviously there's no such thing. Everything we know about the world, for instance, we know that in the 1880s at 221 Baker Street there was a bank. I think that's the case. Everything we know about the world rules out that there is such a thing as Sherlock Holmes, that there is such a thing. Obviously, people don't go to school in Scotland. Wizards don't go to school in Scotland. I take the realist side. There are such things as non-existent fictional characters. The question for realists is, what are they? What is the nature of these things? Meinong, you remember Meinong? According to Meinong, Hermione is in fact a wizard. Hermione is a wizard. She's a female human being. Hermione is the sort of thing we represent her in our ideas as. Not all female human beings on this view exist. Most of them don't exist. The other sort of realist view has it that Hermione isn't really a human being. She isn't really a wizard. There are no wizards. Hermione is an abstract artifact, a cultural artifact created by J.K. Rowling. If you take this view, you deny that Hermione has the properties attributed to her in the fiction. She isn't a wizard. She doesn't have curly hair. But if this is your stance, then a question arises. These are the properties we use to identify Hermione and distinguish her from other characters in the story and in other stories. If she doesn't have any of these properties, how do we know it's Hermione? How do we know that Hermione and Harry and Ron aren't all one and the same thing? The view I take is that we don't. For all we know, there is just one fictional character. All we need for our theoretical purposes is an object for my Hermione thoughts and an object for my Sherlock Holmes thoughts and an object for my Superman thoughts. And if these, in fact, are the same object, then I think that's a theoretical advantage. But I don't have time today to explain the details of that view. Thanks a lot.